Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Coming to you from the city that was nearly shut down twice as a former president and his motorcade got the entire interstate highway shut down so that he could traverse first from the airport to Vine City to stop at a Chick-fil-A to buy some milkshakes and some chicken for some of the patrons and then his entourage, and then went to a Buckhead fundraiser where he made estimates are around $5 million. Former President Donald Trump yesterday visiting Atlanta. Let me start by first giving you some of the cutesy audio from the Chick-fil-A he stopped at in Vine City.
30 milkshakes and also some chicken. I wanted to take care of the customers. Is business good? You're making a lot of money? Everyone getting rich, right?
We live in an era now where our politicians are so out of touch with our way of life, the way we live. I was talking to somebody about this either yesterday or the day before about how we live on these parallel planes, these parallel universes where we can see each other, but we don't live in the same universe. Who walks into a Chick-fil-A and says, yeah, I want 30 milkshakes and some chicken? Sir, would that be a chicken wrap, a chicken sandwich, chicken nuggies, chicken strips? Some chicken. Yes, sir. Would you like that as a chicken sandwich, a chicken wrap, a chicken nuggets, or chicken strips? Some chicken. Okay. The Right Side Broadcasting Network on the Twitter X platform gave us a lot of video from inside this Chick-fil-A where he made a surprise appearance. Let's give you as much of this as we can.
Good-looking people, wow. That was worth it. And I love those, what you have. That's beautiful. Wow. It's art, right? So can I have 30 milkshakes and also some chicken? I want to take care of the customers. Is business good? You're making a lot of money? Everyone can get rich, right? Excellent.
A little bit more of this where he handing out the milkshake.
Milkshakes here at Chick-fil-A.
Stop the steal!
Oh, stop the steal shout. Okay.
Take that.
I'm here to meet you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Yes, we've also knocked doors for you in the past, or your past re-election bid, and when you ran the first time. Yes,
Wow.
I was interning for the GAGOP at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
doing a lot for your tax credit reform bill and everything like that.
Well, we
So,
took
yes.
care of those colleges. And
Sure did. Much better than mine did. So I'm Market ran up so many. This is more health. This is more employment. All in your area. So I don't care what the media tells you, Mr. Trump. Okay, 4 p.m. We do 4 p.m.
Come here, let me give you a hug. That's really nice. No, we did. We took care of the black colleges, universities. They're taken care of now, and she understands it. A lot of people don't understand it. Biden did nothing for them, and I did everything.
Tell them how y'all been suffering, y'all. How y'all
That's really nice, huh?
There's no housing.
You know each other? Do you two know each other? You should.
So President Trump talking about under his administration, the programs and funds that he's provided to African American colleges, and that.
Okay, so let's get to this from Medium. Walter Kimbrough writing about this ruse that President Donald Trump somehow saved HBCUs. He writes, point number one: Congress appropriates funds, not presidents. So the premise that Trump gave more money to HBCUs is incorrect. President Trump did, however, submit a budget which included funding for HBCUs. So the real question I always ask when I hear this is, what did Trump request for HBCUs? His second point, in his first year, Trump requested less for HBCUs. I summed this up in one tweet a few years ago. Walter Kimbrough tweeting, let's look at 6 HBCU programs in the Department of Education. Here is Trump's first budget, fiscal year 18, compared to fiscal year 17 funding for 6 programs. He asked for Title IIIB, $465,000 less. Title IIIF, $5.9 million more. HBCU grad, $120,000 less. HBCU Masters, $7.5 million less. PBI 3A flat, PBI 3F, $1 million more. Total, $1.2 million less. And then he has the screenshots, the receipts, as you will. The 2017 appropriation is what was given the previous year. His budget is his request. Comparing the 2 columns can show where he asks for more and where he asks for less. The 2018 appropriation column is what the schools received, which was higher most of the time. Trump didn't give that money. You can see the recommendations by the House and Senate committee, and that is where the increases were made. Kimbrough, in his third point, in his second year, Trump requested less for HBCUs. Same thing. The bottom 6 categories are funds for HBCUs and PBIs. This is roughly $60 million proposed cut by Trump. The final was an increase of about $4 million. No one ever mentions this because Trump is good at selling a narrative. His fourth point that Kimbrough makes, in his third year, Trump requested less for HBCUs. Same again. Looking at the same 6 categories at the bottom of the screen grabs that he has here on the columns, and notice that 3 of them have been zeroed out. But this time, Trump proposes a $105 million cut. In his fourth and final year, 0.5 Kimbrough makes here, Trump had a flat HBCU budget request, but requested cuts for PBIs. PBI meaning predominantly black institution. He proposes a $27 million cut for PBIs by zeroing them out again after he tried the previous year. He does ask for the maximum $85 million for the mandatory HBCU funding. This is the Future Act that in the previous year he zeroed out to let it expire. Therefore, over the course of 4 budget proposals, Donald Trump attempted to cut almost $200 million from HBCUs and PBIs. In spite of his attempts, each year Congress increased HBCU and PBI funding, not Trump. Giving him credit for the work of Congress that remedied what he tried to harm is wrong. It's like giving Pontius Pilate credit for the resurrection when he was the one who ordered Jesus to be crucified. The fact that HBCU funding increased while Trump was president has nothing to do with him because he never asked for the funding to be increased. There's also, by the way, been a lot of noise made about the erosion of the voter of color bloc for Democrats, or maybe making a migration over. There's been a softening of support for black voters and maybe an opportunity for the GOP to make some inroads. It appears that they have abandoned that strategy, at least in the state of Georgia. From yesterday's Politically Georgia blog on the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Greg Bluestein, Tia Mitchell, Patricia Murphy, Adam Van Brimmer reporting that when national Republicans opened a new Asian American outreach center in the Gwinnett County suburbs in 2021, an enormous crowd of local dignitaries and state officials packed the Berkeley Lake shop to celebrate. Then Senate candidate Herschel Walker commemorated its first anniversary a year later, and multiple national news outlets focused on the center for stories on GOP efforts to expand the party's base into new minority populations. Next paragraph. Now the strip mall spot where the Republican National Committee once held pastor roundtables and Lunar New Year celebrations is home to something different and decidedly more spicy. An adult sex toys and novelty retailer catering to an upscale crowd. The space is part of a wave of RNC outreach centers that have closed in recent years, including at least 2 others in the Atlanta suburbs that Republicans had opened to great fanfare for minority outreach. A Hispanic community center in Suwanee that debuted to a packed crowd in 2022 closed last year and is now home to a dental office. Okay, well, it's not a sex toy shop. And a black community center in College Park that opened 3 years ago has closed its doors and is now up for sale. The downsizing is part of the RNC's apparent shift away from a years-long effort to open minority outreach centers in battleground states, and it highlights President Joe Biden's current ground game advantage as former President Trump treks to Atlanta for a high-dollar event to try and narrow Republicans' fundraising gap. And then let me read this from Newsweek, released yesterday. A new poll has suggested Donald Trump will not garner significant support from black voters in November's presidential election. Blah, 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 blah. Let's skip to the meat here. Ahead of this vote, some reports and polls have suggested there have been a racial realignment with black voters who traditionally support the Democratic Party, opting to vote for the Republicans instead. But new research, something that the GOP must have seen because they've been shuttering these voter outreach centers in minority areas, from Pew Research Center suggests otherwise. A survey shows 83% of black voters favor the Democratic Party, a 3% decline from 1994. Y'all, that's my math here. That's 30 years. 3% in 30 years. That's not exactly sharp. 3% decline from 1994 when 86% aligned in this way. On the other hand, 12% support the Republican Party. This marks a 1% decline from the 1994 numbers when 13% supported the party. Pew Research Center surveyed 10,124 people in its annual survey, and there was a margin of error of plus or minus 1.3 percentage points. However, the research did not ask voters about candidates, only parties, and the polling still suggests he would perform marginally better than in his previous election. He won 8% of the black vote in 2020. Previous Newsweek analysis shows that if Trump wins more than 13% of the vote share, he will gain the highest proportion of the black vote since Richard Nixon did in 1960. But before we go feeling confident, y'all, I want us to read this next paragraph. In 2020, Biden also won 88% of the black demographic, but in January, an Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll showed that 58.6% of black Georgians said they would support Biden, while 20.4% said they would support Trump. 10% of black Georgians said they do not plan to vote in 2024. Speaking to Newsweek in January, Mary Frances Berry, historian at the Pennsylvania State University, cited economic reasons for Trump gaining more of the vote share. Here's her quote. Black males especially cite prices of basic needs. Food, for example, despite the decline in inflation, she said. Some who are small business owners say under Trump it was easier for them to get federal loans. For example, they also cite the backlash against police accountability measures as the George Floyd murder discussion has receded into the sunset. She continues, middle-aged and older black women seem to take a better than Trump lesser of two evils posture. But nobody I know is excited about re-electing Biden. They like Kamala Harris, but lots of folks will probably stay home unless some unexpected positive change in economic prospects or civil rights occurs. Which kind of takes us back to the conversation we were having a little bit yesterday when we saw that the inflation numbers came out and we saw another 3.5% year-over-year increase when the Federal Reserve is looking for numbers in the twos before they do anything about their borrowing rate, which is in the low to mid fives right now. So the banks are adding to that, and that's why we see, for example, mortgage interest rates still in the sevens and could go higher. The same could be said for credit card rates. That is very concerning. And while I do have more to talk about with Trump and his visit to Atlanta yesterday, I want to drill in on, again, these kitchen table issues, these budgetary issues, because there is a little bit of a dissonance that concerns me. So let me catch my breath and we'll dive right in. You can follow The Ron Show on any of your preferred social media accounts, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Twitter X. It's all at Ron Show ATL. You can get show notes and more at ronshowatl.com. You can also even drop a little PayPal this way. Help us keep this show afloat. I don't know, buy me a cup of coffee or something like that. Just a nice little thank you. You notice we try and keep the commercials to a precious few. In fact, within the show, you don't hear them. You may be listening on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, and hear the commercial breaks, but that is them making money. That is not me making money. That is for sure. Anyway, we were talking a little bit about the impact of the African-American vote, the person of color vote, and the 2024 election. And there is noticeable erosion. It's not as profound as I think a lot of prognosticators opined it might be, especially when you look at the party splits. But when you look at the candidates atop the ticket, there is a notable erosion. And what was it Mark Twain said? A lie gets halfway around the world before the truth puts its pants on, right? The HBCU funding lie, we thoroughly eviscerated that. But it's hard to have a profound conversation that takes 2 to 3 minutes to spell out the lie, being a lie, to identify it as a lie, when the lie takes up bumper sticker space. It's gone. It's out the door. It's got a half-mile lead before you're even suiting up to go for a jog. And fortunately, most African-American voters know bullshit when they hear it. It's not about Donald Trump winning a majority of the black vote. It's about him convincing just enough folks that things were better when he was president than they are now. And I've done this a time or two before, and I will do it again. I'm going to caution Democrats. I'm going to caution liberals against being exactly the way they were in 2016 when they thought they had everything in the bag, that the black vote was sewn up, that folks were going to show up and anoint Hillary Clinton because she had Obama's blessing. And what did she kept hot sauce in her purse? Oh, God, it was the worst line. But that, she had the support of the black voter. It's not that she was worried about her opponent having support of the black voter base. She just knew that he wasn't going to garner enough of the African-American vote to curry favor, to win an election. What she didn't calculate, though, was that you may have just enough African-American voter who doesn't care one way or the other to show up and vote. And that's exactly what happened. We had suppressed turnout in Milwaukee. We had suppressed turnout in Philadelphia. We had suppressed turnout in Detroit. Those three cities with lower than anticipated black voter turnout were in three swing states that Hillary Clinton didn't win by a grand total of 77,000 votes? And that's why we don't have a President Hillary Clinton in our rear view or in her second term. Now, listen, don't misread this for me saying I'm blaming black voters for Donald Trump winning or Hillary Clinton losing. I'm not. You've got to go out and campaign. You've got to win the voters over. And I see a similar scenario where at the end of Obama's two presidencies, some black voters had this mindset. And there was a New York Times article about this. A reporter sat in the barbershop and talked to gentlemen in the shop about, why they weren't all that enthusiastic about voting at all or reelecting Obama's Secretary of State. Not necessarily a third Obama term, but you know what I mean. Electing Obama's Secretary of State because they didn't feel like their lives improved that much while Obama was president. And it's not so much about did things get worse for them. They just don't feel like things got marginally better. They did, and they did for all of us in some realm when you consider the Affordable Care Act, and he was ushered into office with the smoldering flames of a housing crisis subsiding. He turned net job losses into net job gains and ended with an 8-year term where he had job gains. But it's the kitchen table stuff, y'all. It's the cost of goods and services. It's what we're facing right now. And I was going back and forth with a friend of mine who is a mortgage lender. We were both opining about the inflationary numbers that came out and how the Fed's probably going to act or not. And I had this hot take, and I said this on the show yesterday. I think the Fed should go ahead and cut the rate anyway, because I think this is the soft landing. They need to recognize that before not acting can bust the economy up too, because folks are living, in part at least, on their credit. They're putting things on the card. And the Fed's interest rate affects the interest rate that the card charges. And when that keeps adding up, eventually you're going to hit a glass ceiling. You're going to hit your peak, and then you're going to have to start cutting back, right? When you start cutting back, retail starts shedding jobs. Manufacturers start shedding jobs. Unemployment goes up. Recession kicks in. And there are more cutbacks, and folks are more cautious with what they spend because their income is impacted. Now, my friend Rob, the mortgage broker, says he disagrees. He thinks that the Fed cutting rates now would just throw fuel on an already ripping economy. I don't actually care much for terms like ripping economy, because it's only ripping because consumers are living beyond their means and relying on credit cards to bridge the gap. And again, that's not going to last forever. And also, we got to stop talking in terms like the economy is ripping, it's roaring, it's hot. It's hot for who? So I carried on that conversation by pointing out that if everyone waits for consumers to hit that wall and for them to stop consuming at the same pace, we're just going to be triggering a recession unnecessarily when we can, at the very least, further delay that softening the cost to borrow. Business isn't going to show any signs of relaxing their drive for profit and profit accounts for more than 50% of inflationary costs. So the Fed adjusting rates is about the only thing that will cool inflation at this point. And I can sit here and go back and forth on the pros and cons of doing that, but I think it's time for the White House to start talking about it. And Donald Trump made a lot of noise when the Fed started raising rates as he was running for re-election. So it's a little bit of a dicey proposition for Biden-Harris 2024 to wander into what Jerome Powell and the Fed board should be doing with interest rates. It's a dicey proposition, but someone's got to start having this conversation, I think. It certainly can't just be this one little real estate agent, realtor who lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and just happens to have some airtime on America One Radio and does a podcast about politics. And it can't just be me, y'all. And listening to economists talk about, well, what we've done before. Listen, what we've done before has gotten us into recessions and depressions and housing crises and savings and loan crises, et cetera, and so on before. So what we've done before is not foolproof, and we've got to stop acting like we have these institutional mores that are infallible. I know it's not popular on the left to talk about things that are of concern in an election cycle for the incumbency, but somebody's got to.
Take The Ron Show wherever you go. Download the America One Radio app to your smartphone and listen on the go. Or in traffic wishing you were on the go. The Ron Show on America One Radio.
All right, so we talked at great length about Donald Trump and visiting Atlanta and stopping in Vine City at the Chick-fil-A to mingle with African Americans living in the city before going to Buckhead, where there were going to be very few African Americans there for him. Kelly Loeffler was there. David Perdue was there. The guy who spearheaded the Buckhead City movement, who doesn't even live here anymore. Why was he here? Bill White. He was there. But, yeah, I don't see any prominent African American names. Nonetheless, Donald Trump came into town, stopped at a Chick-fil-A, bought 30 milkshakes and some chicken for some patrons, mostly for his entourage, and then carried out the HBCU funding lie that we thoroughly eviscerated. Here's some of that audio again.
Make sure I'm taking a few pictures.
Okay.
Now I want one with you. Come on.
Oh, okay, come on.
He's out there.
Personally requested
Come on,
you.
let's go. That's good. Beautiful.
Yeah, can my friend Dom get one too? She's fundraising.
Come on in. Come on in. Come on in. We're going to get rid of Biden.
Bye,
He is the worst president in the history of the United States, and he's horrible to the black community. Whether you like it or not.
Been that way
The
since a
black
senator.
community bad. And check out his record in the 1990s. Check out his record in the 1990s.
You're economically what's for us.
Well, opportunities.
Opportunity wise, everything holistic.
Best job numbers ever.
The First Step Act. Let's talk about it.
And the colleges and
I
universities.
mean, except for now. Okay.
I just got the whole thing down.
I got you.
No, seriously, Donald Trump, when he was president, talked about the unemployment rate for African Americans it being at historic lows. And maybe at that point in time, it did hit an historic number, but it actually hit an historic number a year ago when Joe Biden was president. Now, I believe the March job numbers showed a 0.8% uptick in black unemployment, but a one-off could be a statistical anomaly. We'll double back on that and see what it looks like when we get numbers for this month, next month as well, because unemployment overall went down. Nonetheless, while Donald Trump was in town, a lot of reporters wanted to ask him about the Dobbs decision, his role in the Dobbs decision. I had nothing to do with it, except for the 3 Supreme Court justices he nominated, and then, of course, celebrated the dismantling of Roe v. Wade. I want to play a little bit of a conversation, a little back and forth from this morning's Morning Joe.
So, speaking of, former President Trump is trying to change his position yet again on abortion health care. Trump spoke with reporters following his arrival in Atlanta yesterday, saying he would not sign a federal abortion ban, reversing a promise he made as a candidate back in 2016. And just days after saying abortion policy should be left to the states, he then criticized the state of Arizona's Supreme Court, saying it went too far in restricting abortion access.
Did Arizona go too far? Yeah, they did, and that'll be straightened out. And as you know, it's all about states' rights. That'll be straightened out. And I'm sure that the governor and everybody else are going to bring it back into reason, and that will be taken care of, I think, very quickly. Florida's probably maybe going to change also. See, it's all it's the will of the people. This is what I've been saying. It's a perfect system. So Florida's probably going to change. Arizona's going to definitely change. Everybody wants that to happen. And you're getting the will of the people. It's been pretty amazing when you think.
You know, it is pretty amazing that he could sit there and
He
say
created the situation.
12 things in 30 seconds that all conflict with each other, including...
And we'll see what happens.
Including the lie that Arizona's legislature would fix it quickly, because no, they didn't. Because Republicans, his party, they adjourned quickly because they were freaked out that they actually may stop a 160-year-old abortion ban from being the law of Arizona. I mean, it just keeps getting worse. And this nonsense of his saying, oh, we're going to leave you to the states, but, you know, and then he comes out and says no national abortion ban. He's just offended about 45% of his base. He loses like coming and going. He didn't realize. Republicans had it best when they just cynically sat back and said, oh, we support a national abortion ban, and did nothing about it. Now they're realizing just you know,
just how much they own.
How bad it is. The dog caught the car, and then somebody forced the dog to get in the front seat of the car and drive the car, and they're driving it over the cliff.
I feel like I have to keep saying this. That is former Republican Congressman Joe Scarborough, host of Morning Joe on MSNBC. More Reporter on Trump audio from yesterday with this pointed question.
Do you think a doctor should be punished who perform abortions?
I'll let that be to the states. You know, everything we're doing now is states and states' rights. And what we wanted to do is get it back to the states, because for 53 years it's been a fight. And now the states are handling it. And some have handled it very well, and the others will end up handling it very well. And those are the things that states are going to make a determination about.
Cue this exchange with Chris Matthews and Donald Trump when he was running for president in 2016.
But do you believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form.
10 cents, 10 years,
I don't know. That I don't know.
The abortion debate is going to... Well, first of all, I think these decisions that are being made, the Florida decision and then the subsequent ballot measure, the Arizona decision, and apparently there will be a ballot measure there as well, bring back to the forefront an issue that I previously thought may have languished long enough to sort of subside, to soothe, or not maybe soothe, but maybe just kind of soften the impact of outraged voters. But no, this is all back front and center. And it's April. We're still a long ways off from November, but I can't imagine that folks are going to be forgetting about this now that it is back front and center as a core campaign issue. Again, I've said this before with inflation, immigration, and by the way, we were talking about inflation, and we've talked a great deal about inflation here for the last couple of days. One of the points that I've been trying to make about whether or not the Fed should touch interest rates has to do with the fact that we're dealing with unique circumstances that the Fed's never had to deal with before when accounting for what is driving inflation. And what drives inflation right now, what has driven the raise, the cost of inflation, aside from, again, corporate profits, 53%, give or take, according to recent research and analysis, but also we're dealing with a war in Ukraine. The Ukraine and Russia war that is affecting gas prices. We're seeing that impact here at home as well. And rising rents. And this nation's inability on the whole, or even at the state level, we're just now starting to address rising rent costs. And in Georgia, it's not even so much about dealing with the rent costs. It's about dealing with the 3 times income, the first and last month's rent, the security deposit, the application. Y'all, I help people who are looking for places to rent all the time. And it is jarring how much upfront money is required to show and give to rent something. And I'm not saying that the tenant never gets that money back, but you got to cough it up first, right? I mean, that's impactful. So anyway, the rising cost of rent and gas prices because of the war in Ukraine and are, still coming out of a pandemic and the supply chain crisis, yada, yada, yada. These are all part and parcel to what's affecting our wallets. Did you hear anything in what I just said that somehow President Joe Biden has the levers to pull? I mean, I guess we could end the Ukraine-Russia situation by just capitulating to Putin. Is that what we want? In any event, and I'm sort of just wandering all over the place on this segment today. I apologize for that. In any event, we're seeing tightening polls, especially in the swing states, all within the margin of error now. Whereas 2 months ago, we were all, well, I say we were all, I know I was, hand-wringing about the fact that Biden was trailing by 3 to 5 percentage points in all of the swing states that he needs to win, that Trump needs to lose, in order for Biden to be reelected. From yesterday's Politically Georgia blog, Democrats are taking strides to build up the campaign's political infrastructure, recently announcing a slate of offices and a contingent of new staffers in Georgia devoted to drive up turnout for Biden. I see these all the time. I get these in my inbox. Jobs that are left, JTAL, sends out emails for folks who are looking to hire for campaigns and causes. I see these all the time. I like to keep my finger on the pulse of where the jobs are going. And the DNC hiring in the state of Georgia, Biden-Harris hiring in the state of Georgia, even the Georgia Democratic Party doing some hiring. Man, they need to. Anyway, the Democrats' expansion, back to the blog, highlighted Biden's enormous fundraising edge over his rival and a growing infrastructure that contrasts with Trump's still meager Georgia operation. The Georgia GOP is focused mainly on promoting Trump and financing legal bills for a trio of Republican electors charged in Fulton County's election interference case, while Kemp has directed his political network to help legislative candidates. Now, I know Donald Trump made some off-the-cuff remark when asked about Brian Kemp and how he hopes that Brian Kemp will campaign with him, that Donald Trump helped Brian Kemp win re-election somehow. But Brian Kemp's own wife, Marty Kemp, I believe spoke to WSB-TV last week, and she's pretty much set on just writing Brian Kemp in when it comes time to vote in November. So there's some work to do on that. Also, we got to keep our eye on what's happening in Manhattan. Politico, Ankush Kardori wrote an opinion piece, headline, How Trump Could Pull Off an Upset Victory in Court. The former president's defense has taken some major hits, but Trump could still win his trial in Manhattan. And there's the idea that he could, or his defense team could, hammer at the credibility of Michael Cohen. Don't think that would be all that hard. Guy has been caught lying quite a bit, mostly at Donald Trump's pleasure. But Ankush writing, despite what you may have heard from some legal commentators, this is not a normal amount of baggage for a key cooperator in a major criminal case. There is a reason why roughly half of the respondents in a recent poll that we commissioned with Ipsos said that Cohen is not honest, and why a plurality, nearly 40% of respondents, said that the prosecutor's case could be weaker if it is based in large part on Cohen's testimony. Supporters of the case against Trump argue that these concerns over Cohen's credibility are overstated. They prefer a different C word, corroboration, that will be essential to prosecutor strategy. Anyone who believes that this trial of Mr. Trump's alleged crimes under New York state law is dependent, even primarily dependent, on Michael Cohen's testimony is in for a big surprise. That's Lanny Davis, the veteran Washington lawyer who served as a legal advisor to Cohen. Davis began working with Cohen around the same time he was sentenced to prison and joined Cohen during his subsequent interviews with the Manhattan DA's office. Davis was careful during that discussion with Politico not to reveal any information that he learned from those meetings, but he firmly maintained that the case against Trump will not rest on Cohen's word. I'll give you a little bit more of that Politico column and some thoughts and comments on how which could happen in weeks. Conviction of Donald Trump could affect the presidential race. Thank you for listening to The Ron Show, the American One Radio app, AmericanOneRadio.com, wherever you podcast. So we're in the home stretch. Thank you for listening to The Ron Show, whether it's on the American One Radio app, AmericanOneRadio.com, wherever you podcast, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com as well. So as I was reading from the Politico column that Ankush Kardori filed this morning, 5 a.m., good for him. He writes, for all of Donald Trump's bluster, he faces an uphill battle to avoid conviction in his Manhattan criminal trial beginning Monday. The fact is, most criminal defendants who go to trial end up being convicted. Trump himself is also incredibly unpopular in Manhattan, and his courtroom antics in recent months have probably not endeared him to many prospective jurors in the borough. Worse still for the former president, Judge Juan Merchan, who was presiding over Trump's criminal trial, significantly narrowed Trump's potential lines of defense in a series of pretrial rulings on legal and evidentiary issues. But Trump and his lawyers still have two robust defense strategies, one obvious, one surprising, that they can use in the courtroom to try and rebut prosecutors' charges that Trump falsified his company's business records in connection with a hush money payment to the adult film star Stormy Daniels in the run-up to the 2016 election. And that's important, by the way. It's not just that he allegedly paid hush money to Stormy Daniels, it's that he falsified business records to do so. It's committing a crime to hide another crime that I think sort of narrows one of the ways that he and his trial lawyers are going to try and get him out. As Ankush Kadori writes, first, watch for the defense to take a wrecking ball to Michael Cohen, okay? Then there's another, less explored route that Trump's team could try, asking the judge to give the jury the option of convicting him on lesser misdemeanor offenses instead of the felony counts that have actually been brought by Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg and his team of prosecutors. Kadori writes, a person familiar with Trump's legal strategy told me that some of Trump's lawyers have quietly, albeit tentatively, considered that option in the run-up to the trial, which has not been previously reported. Trump's attorneys did not respond to a request for comment. Now, obviously, he doesn't want to be convicted at all, the person familiar with Trump's legal strategy said, but a misdemeanor conviction in state court in Manhattan is going to have absolutely no effect on this guy's ability to run for office or on his liberty. Read into that. A misdemeanor slap on the wrist doesn't put him at Rikers Island, and it doesn't derail his ability to run for president, where he can then deal with the other trials he's undergoing while indicted for. Kadori, in fact, writes, Trump's quest to regain the White House appears to exist in large part to allow him to avoid prison time as a result of the pending criminal cases against him. The conventional wisdom in Washington is that his other trials, particularly for trying to overturn the 2020 election, hello, Fonnie Willis, pose the gravest political threats to his effort. But polling conducted by Ipsos and Politico magazine suggests that a conviction in Manhattan could indeed hurt him electorally, particularly with independents. If Trump's lawyers can pull off an upset victory, they could not only save Trump from the prospect of spending some time on Rikers Island like his former CFO, that happened yesterday, but also potentially reshape the political dynamics surrounding Trump's legal problems heading into November. And by the way, the poll that he's referring to, he wrote about a month ago. A Politico magazine Ipsos poll suggests that a conviction in the Manhattan trial could turn off independents. He wrote, 8 months out, we had questions. Among them, if Trump is convicted of a crime, how will it affect his chances of returning to the White House? What do Americans make of his claim that he should be immune from prosecution even if he actually perpetrated a criminal scheme to steal the last election? Does the public trust the Supreme Court to decide that issue fairly? Well, we all know the American people do not trust the Supreme Court. He writes, to find out, we worked with Ipsos to poll the American people, and we discovered some surprising answers to all of these questions and several more. The bottom line is that a conviction in Manhattan may not doom Trump, but it would do real damage. More than a third of independents said a guilty verdict would make them less likely to support Trump's candidacy. In a close race, that might matter. It also cuts against the conventional wisdom, as analysts have sometimes doubted the political impact of the prosecution in Manhattan, which concerns Trump's alleged falsification of his company's business records in connection with a hush money payment to the adult film star Stormy Daniels. Read that again. Trump's alleged falsification of his company's business record, which is just a crime in and of itself, in connection with the hush money payment, a crime in and of itself, to the adult film star Stormy Daniels. I go back to the crime to cover a crime because I think that's what's going to give his attorneys pause or create an obstacle to them even going to Juan Merchan, the lawyer, or the prosecutors and saying, why don't we just water this down to a misdemeanor and get on out of here? The trial, which was set to start March 25th, was delayed by at least 3 weeks to allow more time to review records from federal prosecutors. And it looks like, again, we are set to see that begin on Monday. One more thing that I think this is where Democrats in the Biden-Harris campaign have to start talking real brass tacks when it comes to promises and delivering on promises versus obstruction. It's a conversation that's kind of hard to say, well, it could have been worse. But when you're dealing with, we've talked about the potential fracturing of voters of color, the black voting bloc, particularly with black males, We've seen some degradation in that. Democrats have to make the case that you may not be happy with the results. You may not be happy that we tell you we're going to do something and we can't deliver on, 35% of it. You only get 65% of what we promise, or whatever number you want to affix to that. But there's a choice between a party that's trying to do something for you and being obstructed by the other party, or just giving in and voting for the other party. I mean, trees don't vote for chainsaws, would they? Here's a prime example. Ty Tagami with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporting yesterday. Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr, Republican, has signed on to a lawsuit with 6 other states in an attempt to stop another federal effort to provide student loan debt relief to millions of borrowers nationwide. Disproportionately, by the way, affecting women of color. Women, black women. The lawsuit by Republican-led states seeks to block a second attempt by President Joe Biden to wipe out debts for low-income borrowers who have fallen behind on repayment and reduce debt for others. The U.S. Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision with conservative justices in the majority, ruled against the first effort last year. The latest lawsuit is similar to one filed last month by 11 states and follows the one that led to the high court's ruling in Biden v. Nebraska. Despite the court having already settled this issue, the Biden administration continues to brazenly violate the law, Carr said in a statement Wednesday, adding that, quote, it's wrong to be forced to pay off other people's student loans, particularly those with the highest earning potential. The Biden administration says it is seeking relief for struggling former students, including those who attended, quote, low financial value college programs and those who never graduated. It says it's trying to address racial equity and a legacy of wealth disparity exacerbated by the interest on loans. It said that a typical black student who started college in the mid-1990s still owed 95% of their original debt 2 decades later, and that Hispanic borrowers are more likely to default than their white counterparts. The administration on Monday announced several new relief plans that, in conjunction with the pre-existing Savings on a Valuable Education Program, or SAVE, would help more than 30 million borrowers. The SAVE program is being targeted by Carr, a Republican, and his GOP counterparts in Arkansas, Florida, Missouri, North Dakota, Ohio, and Oklahoma. Ty Tagami continuing, the president's Plan B attempt to force taxpayers to pay for the debts of others is no stronger than his Plan A attempt that was blocked last year, according to the lawsuit filed Tuesday in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Missouri. It added that Biden's latest expansion, or Plan C, is aimed at canceling waves of student debt in the run-up to the November election. Some see Biden's plan as an effort to galvanize support among young voters. The Biden administration, meanwhile, is touting the impact, saying 4 million borrowers have already been approved for debt relief. A state-by-state comparison released by the U.S. Department of Education on Monday tallied borrowers who are seeing significant relief to the tune of $6.4 billion for more than 109,000 Georgians alone. Okay, so if I'm being honest, I really wanted to spend a little bit of time today, and I'm obviously running out. I think I've got a minute left here to talk about the tug-of-war going on between Fulton County and the city of Atlanta. Literally a shouting match at Fulton County's commission hearing last night.
Shut up. I'm talking.
Make me.
I'm talking.
Make me.
I'm talking.
Make me.
It's my time. It's
me.
my time.
Make me shut up.
It's my time.
I didn't think so.
Yeah.
WANF TV's Patrick Quinn reporting on this story.
I've covered a lot of local government meetings in my time, a lot of them. Most of them make your eyes bleed. I have never seen an interaction like that, especially between two of the same commissioners. That was County Commissioner Marvin Arrington Jr. and Commissioner Khadija Abdurrahman going back and forth all over animal services, that new contract. And some residents within the city of Atlanta say, while local officials like those two are squabbling, they're the ones suffering. Residents are. For here in Southwest Atlanta, it's been months. A stray dog has roamed through their yards in the Veltri neighborhood, eating their trash. Some feel threatened. No collar, no home. They say calls for help to the county, to the city, to the Atlanta police, they go unanswered. Today, county leaders, they considered reinstating services with the city of Atlanta, even without a signed contract. That effort failed.
All right, I hear the music. Let's put a pin in that. We'll discuss that a little bit more at great length later this week. Thank you for listening to The Ron Show. Replays 5 to 6 p.m. on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com. On demand all day at ProgressiveVoices.com and via podcast as well. Show notes at RonShowATL.com. Have a great day.